Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the podcast that follows the money behind our beautiful game. And when I say follows the money, says goodbye to it at the moment, unfortunately. I'm Kevin Day. And over there, only I can see him, which is it's a real existential dilemma. I keep forgetting that when you listen to this, all you can do is listen. And I can see him. So there's a lot of elaborate book reorganising he does just for my benefit. Hello, Kieran, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Kevin. Yes, it's Good. A sunny day. Walk the dog, so that's my duties for the day done.
Mm-hmm. It seems like we seem to be doing this every day. Somehow, I seem to spend every day in an office somewhere talking to you about something. But never mind, here we are, and we've got it's our Thursday pod, so it's the big one, the non-questions one. Although we've all got time on our hands, so the question one is getting longer and longer on Mondays.
It is.
Today's the one we've got a lot of issues to deal with. And I mean a lot of issues. And coming up, we have the row over who has and who hasn't taken a pay cut at Arsenal. Barcelona's valiant effort, I think, to combat Corona. And it says here, and I've been busy this morning with family stuff, as you know, Kieran. This is the first time I've read this script, and I'm not happy to read it. It says, an astonishing claim from Crystal Palace.
It wasn't me. I didn't write that, Kevin.
An astonishing... Well, I should be having words with Guy, the producer, about this. Well, I think is a perfectly normal claim about Crystal Palace, but that's coming up. But first, just before we're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, I'm sorry to let a little bit of showbiz magic out for you there. People, we're not actually live as it happens, mainly because of Kieran's TV and dog walking schedule commitments. But just before we start recording this on Wednesday, Kieran, and I don't think this was necessarily predicted by anyone, but National League clubs have now voted to end the season. Now, I'm guessing that National League, it's the same as the EFL and the Premier League. This is a vote amongst the clubs themselves, is it?
That's right. Ultimately, the National League is a members' club, and they've decided to curtail activities. What's not coming clear, however, is the impact upon promotion and relegation. So until that dust settles, we don't know who are the winners and losers out of this. Clearly there'll be clubs like Barrow who were hoping to go up. There is clearly a gap in League Two because there's only 91 clubs presently in the top four divisions. So what will happen in terms of playoffs and so on is up for grabs.
Barrow are the first club to break ranks and say they're not happy with this, which implies clearly they voted against it. Is this a decision they would have made in conjunction with League Two and the EFL? Because obviously, as you say, it does impact on the number of clubs that will be in the EFL next season.
I presume that there must have been some form of communication that the vote was going to take place out of professional courtesy. What we are seeing in the National League is that the maintenance costs, the day-to-day running costs of the clubs are... Yeah, they're significant, and if you can effectively put those National League clubs into some form of hibernation over the course of the next few months, then that's going to increase the chances of them surviving. I think with Rhyl effectively being wound up last night because they couldn't pay the rent, that's really acted as a shock to the system, and that might have accelerated this vote.
We'll talk about Rhyl a little more in a moment, but just in terms of players' contracts, which we've been talking a lot about on this pod recently, and we'll be doing later on in terms of some Arsenal players. Are all the players now in the NFL, in the National League, I beg your pardon, are they essentially laid off now? I mean, and is part of the plan that if football is able to come back around August, September, that they'll be ready to go quicker than maybe the EFL and the National Leagues and the League One, League Two, who are still fulfilling the fixtures from this season?
Well, although the leagues have committed to stop playing football, they still have a legal obligation because players have signed contracts. So those contracts will expire either the 30th of April or the 31st of May. I think when we spoke to Lee Worgan, he sort of inferred that National League contracts tended to finish earlier than those in the higher leagues because they tended to finish the football activities that much quicker as well. So I think what we will see is there'll be a lot of players over the summer literally sitting around sort of keeping themselves fit because they'll be going for trials, presumably when some form of pre-season starts, with a view to being able to sign up for clubs for next season.
So these are players at any of these clubs at a level where, for example, they can claim universal credit now?
Potentially, yes. I mean, I think the majority of the clubs, if not all of them, will have been furloughing the players given the pay scales that they're on. And they will be looking at, or they'll be talking to their agents and their advisors. If they've got contracts which are being paid up till the end of April, they wouldn't be able to claim universal credit, presumably until the contract expiry date.
And for those of our listeners who may be new to the pod, or where have you been, remind them who Lee is that you just mentioned earlier.
Well, Lee Morgan is the Dover Athletic goalkeeper. He came on the show a few weeks ago and he was extremely articulate and presented the case for non-league football very well. He's in the position. He's played over 600 games himself. He's 36 years old. He's at that sort of transition phase of his career. But he felt that he could probably continue next season as well. So he'll be uncertain as to his future.
Now, you mentioned Rhyl. Tell us a little bit more about Rhyl. They're one of those clubs where, a little bit like Wrexham, where it must get so frustrated from when the vast majority of people in that part of North Wales on a Saturday head off to Liverpool or Everton to watch their football. So Rhyl is a club, I presume, that's always struggled to attract attention, and now they've gone bust. So was this unexpected? Is there, as people have said, that could lead to a domino effect? Is that a fear?
I think it's no surprise that a club has gone to the wall, and you could have picked one of many. They had a £24,000 rent bill that the landlord wasn't prepared to negotiate a discount, and they simply didn't have the money to pay it. So effectively, they're being turfed out because they can't play at the stadium anymore, and there is no future. So that they've wound themselves up. And it is sad because it doesn't matter how big or how small the town is, it's still part of your local identity. And you enter the FA Cup each year and you're never quite sure how you're going to get. And people can get excited when you make progress or even progress through the non-league pyramid itself. So, a little bit of that part of North Wales isn't going to exist anymore.
This is a perennial theme on this show. I know football, as we have to remind ourselves, old romantics that we are, football, of course, is a business like any other business, and it's subject to the vagaries of the economic upturns and downturns. But for the sake of £26,000 to lose a football club, it doesn't seem a lot, does it, considering the money involved in football? I know there are people who have lost their businesses listening to this for the sake of less money than that, but it doesn't seem a lot of money to lose a football club for, is it?
It's not, but the trouble is, it's just sort of the old Mr. McCorber argument.
To them, it is. Yeah.
If you haven't got a farthing, you're bankrupt. And the chances are there will have been other creditors as well who would have been unpaid. So therefore, what would have happened if there'd been some form of crowdfunding scheme or somebody had come as a benefactor and paid the landlord? Other creditors will say, "Well, why are you giving them priority over us?"
I see. Well, the National League has stopped, but Rick Parry, who's chair of the EFL, has confirmed in quite a vehement manner that the Championship and League One and League Two will take place behind closed doors. My question on that is, TV, the rumours that the games will be shown live on TV when this happens. They can't show all of them, surely, can they?
Well, they can. I mean, Rick sent an open letter to all supporters of EFL clubs at the back end of, or a few days ago. And in it, he said that the intention was to complete the season. I think that's good for sporting integrity. But it's also good from a legal point of view. Otherwise, there would have been lawsuits flying left, right and centre. And the intention is to get those matches to fans somehow. Now, at present, the EFL have something called the iFollow system, which I think it cost you £45 to sign up for, and that gave you home and away audio commentary of your chosen EFL club, plus some sort of TV bits behind the scenes. Sometimes you a bit like Chelsea TV or Manchester United TV, and so on. The take up on that was a bit hit and miss. Not all clubs bought into it. Yet there were some criticisms, but I think some of the larger clubs had something of a similar nature. So the EFL does have the ability and the facilities to get effectively stuff down the pipes. So what they will be able to do is to stream matches. So those EFL clubs who have season ticket holders, all you have to do is to send your email address, or the club will send you to your email address. This is the link that you need for this Saturday's match. and you can watch it. It's not the same as being there, as we know. But I think we had this discussion that most fans, they just want their clubs to be in existence this time next year. So, yeah, you'll be a bit frustrated that you're not getting the same experience as being there. But as a next best thing, and given that we've now run out of Netflix to watch, there is, I think there will be an appeal for it. In terms of clubs such as Leeds and West Brom and Forest and those clubs which are going for promotion to the Premier League, what we could see is very big audiences for the home matches. So Leeds might have had a match scheduled to kick off at 3:00 on a Saturday where they'd normally expect to get their 35 or 36,000. Well, what they'll be able to do through this is they'll be able to double or treble that because they've got a big following.
Stuff down the pipes. I wrote that down. That's a technical expression, is it? Stuff down the pipes. Because I've worked in the TV industry for quite some time. I've never said let's send some stuff down the pipes. I've said let's create a TV show for the people at home. But you is just sending stuff down the pipes.
Well, I'm not very good on technology, as you know. In fact, we're both quite Luddite in that regard. So I was struggling for the appropriate words, and as you know, my pronunciation isn't the best, and my use of language isn't the best at times either.
Well, you're not very good at technology, but you're very good at being filmed, as we've seen on every media outlet recently. Now, you may have explained this to me before, but as you know, I'm a bear of small brain when it comes to the finance stuff. The money from this stuff down the pipes, showing all the games, this will go to the EFL and then be distributed evenly, or will the bigger clubs, Leeds, will they get the bigger share because more people will be watching?
Well, that degree of detail hasn't been broadcast. I think what Rick Parry was trying to do was to reassure fans is that if you are a season ticket holder, if you are a regular fan, you'll get the opportunity to see your club. The way that the EFL presently distributes money is that 80% of it goes to Championship clubs, 12% to those in League One, and 8% to League Two. So it could be that process will continue, or they might weight it to a certain extent that those clubs that are picking up bigger audiences will pick up a slightly bigger slice of the pie.
And presumably this is in conjunction with the games that will be on Sky as normal. Some of these behind closed doors will be shown as they would have been on a Friday night or a Sunday afternoon anyway, will they?
Yes, so I think the way that it will operate is that if Sky were already committed to having these matches taking place at scheduled times, then that they will still be broadcast on Sky as per normal. But those fans who don't subscribe to Sky, they'll be able to watch it via the streaming service as an alternative.
I mean, psychologically, it'll be wonderful to see football back on the TV screens, even though ideally it'd be in a pub or with mates around the house, but it will be a step in the right direction. But there are rumours that one or two League Two clubs are not entirely happy about the season continuing. I can't understand why any club wouldn't want some form of football to be returning as soon as possible.
Well, I think in respect of certainly this was an article in the Mail a couple of days ago where some of the League Two clubs felt that actually the costs of putting on these fixtures would exceed the revenue that they were going to generate, and because they are living literally on a hand-to-mouth existence at present, that actually ending the season, as we've seen in the National League, as is going to happen in the Scottish lower leagues, and is also happening in Holland. I won't even attempt to pronounce it. The Dutch Major League. They've effectively written off the season as well. So if it's happening in sort of medium-sized Premier Leagues in Europe, you can see therefore there'll be a similar impact for the lower league clubs here in England.
I'm amazed you can't pronounce Dutch words, because for some reason I assume you've spent a lot of time in Amsterdam. I don't know why that is.
I have spent an awful lot of time in Amsterdam. In fact, I was due to speak to the KNVB last week with regards to sort of helping them with sort of going forwards in generating money for the Dutch League, because whilst I find Dutch football and Dutch football culture absolutely amazing, it's not as lucrative as you would expect it to be, apart from the club which qualifies for the Champions League. Just
coming back to the League Two clubs then, have they got a point? I mean, even if a club who would normally have 2,500 people there have got 50 journalists and coaches and whatever, they still need to lay on stewards and policing and other match day stuff around it. presumably evening games, would they incur floodlight costs? So do they have a point? Is it almost as expensive to put a game on behind closed doors?
I think they will have done their sums. I think some clubs would have perhaps liked to have laid staff off totally. They might be using the furloughing scheme, but it's still costing them money to do things like cut the grass. Because if you've got a groundsman, he's got to be doing his day job. And he can't be furloughed because the nature of furlough, of course, is you're putting staff into hibernation, and one of the rules is they can't do any work.
Yeah.
So therefore, there are still those other overheads which are being incurred. And if the clubs feel that they are going to be on a knife edge, then you can see the decisions that they've made. And there could be an element of self-interest in this as well, of course, because if you are fourth or fifth bottom of League Two, you might be thinking, well, if it's all called off now, then we're safe.
Yeah, of course. Into the Premier League then, and what seems to be our endless fascination these days with Premier League players' wages. I mean, I was always brought up to believe it was impolite to ask about how much anybody was paid to do anything, essentially. But seems to be open season on Premier League footballers. Arsenal players and staff, we understand, have voluntarily agreed a 12.5% pay cut, or have they? Because the tabloids seem to want to pull the rug for some reason from underneath Arsenal's feet. Politicians and journalists who in no way are taking any kind of pay cut whatsoever seem to think they have every right to comment on whether or not professional footballers are doing the same.
Well, what appears to be the case in respect of Arsenal is that Mikel Arteta was sort of at the forefront of this. And as we know, Arsenal have had a pretty rocky period in the last 2 or 3 years. Whilst there will be some people that seem to think that everything wrong with the club was connected with Arsene Wenger, subsequent events have suggested that that's not the case. So there was talk of this 12.5% voluntary agreement between the players, but then it transpired that Mesut Ozil was unhappy with this particular agreement. Now, he is supposed to be, if not the highest paid player in the Premier League, then pretty damn close to it. He's said that he's not willing to go along with the proposal. Now, Mesut Ozil does give lots of money to causes which he feels are closer to his heart. Since then, we've seen Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher weigh in on the club side of things, saying that all the players should take it, including Mesut Ozil. And it started to get a little bit personal. You can understand it from the club's point of view in terms of cash flow, that there are benefits in the players taking a pay cut. But also, when you then go and look at things a little bit further, if Arsenal qualify for the Champions League, that pay cut gets reversed. Because the rewards of being in the Champions League, now we don't know whether that's going to be a top 4 or a top 5 place, because we've got the unresolved issue of Manchester City's charges to deal with. The rewards of being in the Champions League are in excess of 100 million a year.
And as you've pointed out before, and I think it's fair to point out again, for every pound a footballer doesn't get, it's 40 odd pence of that or 60 odd pence of that is something the Inland Revenue don't get. Is that right?
That's correct. So I mean, if a business cannot afford to pay somebody, I think that's one thing, and you can understand asking people for pay cuts. If that business is being bankrolled by a rich individual, or the owner of the business has doubled or trebled his or her money as a result of investing in the club. So if we take a look at Spurs, for example, the value of Spurs is around about £2 billion. When Joe Lewis and Daniel effectively acquired ownership of the club, it was a mere fraction of that. So what the players will be saying is, well, hold on, I'm negotiating with somebody who has made hundreds of millions of pounds out of Arsenal Football Club or Liverpool Football Club or Spurs or whoever it's going to be, and they're asking me to take a pay cut. There's been some really good stuff written in The Athletic recently about those players who never get to first team. And what we do forget is we talk about footballers' wages. 999 out of 1,000 kids that go to an academy aren't going to step foot, and they will have been there for 12 years. So whilst the focus is all on the people who are successful, actually it's a ruthless industry, and partly due to the fact it's an industry which is purely built on merit. If you look at other, if I think about the world of finance, which I occasionally dip my toes into, I know people that are employed there because their father's a client, their uncle owns a hedge fund, and so on. And it's not necessarily a meritocracy. It's still a pretty ruthless business, but you're still going to be doing the same job at 40, 50, 60. Average player has a lifespan of 8 years.
So it's when you mention that a club like Tottenham is worth £2 billion, 10 minutes after we've talked about Rhyl going out of business for £26,000. I know there's not a link, but there bloody well should be, as far as I'm concerned, frankly. If we can't agree about Arsenal, we can agree that the Sheffield United have the manager, coaching staff and playing staff at Sheffield United have agreed an across-the-board 10% pay cut.
Yeah, and I know you dislike having good words about being supportive of other clubs. Everything I hear about Sheffield United in terms of Chris Wilder just makes me like the guy more and more. I think the way he's conducted himself, the way he's brought a side from League One to the Premier League, playing attacking football, keeping to his principles, and now being prepared to do this, in a year which Sheffield United are going to have a relatively good year financially, but as we've established, it's nothing to do with profits. It's all to do with managing cash and fair play to them, because let's face it, they're not going to be on the same level of income as players at Arsenal. Arsenal players are on average £5.8 million a year. Even with a 12.5% pay cut, they're still on over £5 million a year each.
Yeah, I have, for the moment, put a lot of my petty dislikes against other clubs to one side in this crisis, while I acknowledge that they are doing good things, but I will still find comedy reasons not to like every other club in the league. Now, Newcastle United already, this is interesting because it only really came up as a subject last week, the Newcastle takeover, but already we're at the fit and proper person stage of the process. And I'm afraid I have to say, for what I've learned from you since we started this pod in October, would say, for what it's worth, we're at the fit and proper person stage of the process. So where do we actually stand, and which of the people that you spoke about last week are now in pole position to take them over?
Well, my understanding is that contracts have been exchanged. So again,
wow.
we have moved on from our conversation last week, and a deposit has been lodged in terms of respect of buying the club. So clearly, Ashley and PIF, the Saudi Arabian investment fund, have come to form clearly an agreement there. It does look like it's 80% PIF, 10% the Reuben brothers, and the story is that it's going to be one of the sons of the Reuben brothers who's going to be on the board of directors, and Amanda Staveley is in my understanding is going to be the eyes and ears of PIF, and she's going to have a 10% stake as well. So I think what they said was that if they had any reservations about getting involved in English football, by Amanda Staveley committing to buy 10% of the club herself, she was showing a degree of financial commitment that she wouldn't have done if she was purely a broker.
No, when you say a deposit has been lodged, it's is it a fixed deposit on Premier League rules? Does it have to be 5%, 10% of the value of the club, or is it an amount of money?
It's merely an amount of money. It's the same as when you're buying a house. It's actually an agreement between two parties. What we do have at present is the Premier League going through the owners and directors test. And then this morning, I don't know whether you saw, Richard Keys decided to wade in because the Qatari authorities, they are opposed to this deal because what we have is piracy in the Middle East. But beIN Sports, which is the major broadcaster and has the rights to the Premier League football in the Middle East, its TV network, it has been pirated by an organisation called Be Out, and that is allegedly based in Saudi Arabia. Now, if you're familiar with the geopolitics of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and Qatar don't like each other. They've been having this Cold War running now for a couple of years. The last time I was in Qatar, I was doing some teaching there. Things were getting a little bit tasty between the two. At one stage, there were there were tanks on the border, and what happened was the Qatari emir, he phoned up Turkey, and Turkey flew across gunships, and it was all getting, very, very aggressive between the two parties. There's clearly a major dislike, and therefore the Qatari people are trying to persuade the Premier League to not approve the Saudi takeover, as is the same with Amnesty International. They've written a fairly long piece with regards to the issues they have with Saudi Arabia. But if you're going to do that from a Premier League standpoint, we've got Russian ownership, we've got Chinese ownership, we've got American ownership, we've got UAE ownership, and you descend into legal disputes and whataboutery.
Yeah, it would be nice in an ideal world if the Premier League were to extend the fit and proper person test beyond finances, but that's not going to happen. I'm not going to mention Richard Keys because I would imagine he can afford better lawyers than I can. So that's a discussion for off-air. And all I will say is to any Saudi investors listening to this, if you are about to invest money in Newcastle United, if it is a bit like getting a mortgage, go for the highest survey possible. Splash out on a proper survey. Don't do what I did and go for the mid-range one, because I'm actually looking at some of the problems caused by that now. I imagine the Saudis can afford the proper top-of-the-range survey, can't they, Kieran?
I suspect so.
Now, as a Palace fan, even as a Palace fan, especially the way things are at the moment with football, my heart does go out to Charlton fans. I've got quite a few friends who are Charlton fans. It doesn't stop me teasing them in public, but just when it looked like they had, as we've said before, jumped out of the frying pan, they're in the proverbial fire, and it's not. Charlton fans are now asking. Charlton fans, in the past, we may say, remember they started their own political party to get them back to the Valley. Charlton fans have a history of campaigning and a history of organising themselves very well. So this will be done properly. This won't be an ad hoc couple of emails. Charlton fans are asking for reassurance from East Street Investment because the EFL have now launched an investigation into the January takeover. And it seems, from what you've told me, Kieran, it takes quite a lot for the EFL to launch an investigation in the first place. So that's not a good sign, is it?
Well, yeah, it looks as if some form of charges have been made by the EFL. When a new owner acquires a club, there are two elements to the fit and proper tests. The first of which is that you mustn't be a criminal. You must have no unspent convictions, I think is the appropriate phrase, not outstanding, as I said incorrectly once.
Unspent. I'd rather have outstanding than unspent, to be perfectly honest. With some of the stories you told me about Russia and Amsterdam, unspent it just doesn't cut it for me. Well, anyway, whatever the legal reason is,
So that is actually a relatively low hurdle for people to pass, and then you must have proof of funds. And effectively what you've got to do is you've got to be able to show the EFL not only can you present a budget, but you've actually got the financial backing to support that budget in terms of the expected losses and costs in relation to the club for the short to medium term. So we're talking about a couple of years as a rule. In respect of Charlton, and the fear of Charlton fans is that they could be Berry Mark too. And some of the parallels are a concern. You had an owner who wasn't particularly popular, but was covering the losses of the club. He was anxious to sell. He then sold the club for £1. So it looks as if the news which has come out that the East Street Investments only paid £1 to Roland de Chachelet. I suspect his outstanding loans were just kept as that, and therefore they'd be paying a low rate of interest on those. So they've effectively paid £1 for the name of the club. And since then, things have deteriorated. It looks as if the EFL are unhappy with the new owners and their inability to provide proof of funds. And there have been a lot of accusations levelled at all of the parties connected to the new organisation.
You've actually answered my question there, because I was assuming that the fit and proper person test must have been done already because these people have been in charge of the club. So this is the EFL asking why they haven't yet provided the evidence for them to be considered fit and proper people.
That's correct. And again,
right, okay.
if we look at the parallels with Bury, what we saw was Steve Dale just kept on prevaricating and coming up with excuses, and his public pronouncements became increasingly bizarre. as to the reasons why he wouldn't give any information to the EFL. The concerns of Charlton fans is that the new owner is going down that route, and therefore they fear a similar outcome.
See, this is what I genuinely don't understand this, Kieran, and you have met a lot more football owners than I have. Of course you have. I can understand why people would want to buy a football club. I imagine it must be great to be able to say, yeah, I own Charlton Athletic Football Club. But if you can't financially do it, if you can't physically do it, why do you even start the process knowing that you're unable to prove to the Football League authorities that you can do it, and that inevitably some weeks, some months down the line, you'll be quizzed an investor? I don't get it. Surely most businessmen will, again, if you want to use the house analogy, you don't ask for a mortgage on a house that's, I wouldn't ask for a mortgage on a £4 million house because I know that it wouldn't get beyond the first, so I don't understand why these people do it.
Well, they do it. I mean, I'm not making any accusations here, but if you manage to get inside that house, and then you take out the fridge and the television and all the fittings, and then disappear, then you might have benefited financially yourself. If we take a look at what happened with Bury, within 24 hours of acquiring the football club, Steve Dale had set up Bury FC Heritage and Bury FC this, that, and the other, and he started transferring assets from the football club itself to these other companies. So there is an opportunity. And I'm not saying this has happened at Charlton. We've got no idea. There is an opportunity for somebody with ulterior motives to acquire a business and then to do some asset movements. And if you take a look at Lawrence Bassini, who has been was the guy who was in charge at Watford and was then banned from football, this guy has been associated with 3 or 4 clubs since then, and each one his claims have been more and more fantastical.
Steve Dale was like a magician. I mean, Steve Dale was like David Copperfield. He told us he was going to do it, and then did it basically under our noses. These guys at Charlton, I mean, they spoke. I mean, they seemed like people who genuinely wanted to save the club. This again, what I don't understand. I just feel so sorry for Charlton fans. It just yet again, it's another example of how we are the victims of these chances, essentially.
Yes, I mean, let's hope that there is a satisfactory resolution. I've been in contact with some Charlton fans this week, and I can't say anything on the pod, but they are looking at all eventualities as to where they stand in terms of the next step for Charlton. They're good people, and it doesn't matter who you support. The fans are the good people at all clubs. Most owners are good people as well. There's bad people in all industries, and there's chancers and rogues and so on.
Well, next time you see the Charlton fans, tell them when we're through this, if they need some sort of comedy benefit, we'll sort something out. If they need to raise money. So, and even I don't think even Charlton fans who don't like me would object to me saying from Charlton to Barcelona is a leap of some considerable imagination. Don't get upset, Charlton fans. Barcelona are a bigger club than you. Let's until this week, I might have said they're a bigger club than Palace, but as we'll discover soon, clearly they're not. So let's when it turns out that Barcelona owe us everything, but Barcelona are doing something they said they would never do, and I think until a season ago, you would imagine they would certainly never do. Mind you, they said that about shirt sponsorship, but they're selling the naming rights to the new camp, but for the best of reasons.
That's right. They've been in contact with the Barcelona Foundation, and there is a bit of a civil war taking place in the boardroom. At present, six board members have resigned. So I think Barcelona are trying to improve their public perception with the fan base, which is very important for a Basque club as it is. And what they've therefore said is that the new camp will be known as either the Nike new camp or the FM Barcelona or whatever it's going to be. But it's estimated that they could get around about 20 to 30 million euros for the naming rights for a single season. And again, in terms of what they did in terms of moving to shirt sponsorship, initially that money was given to a charitable cause, and all the money from the naming rights of the new camp will go to a coronavirus, either to the people trying to create the vaccines, or to local hospices or things of that nature. And I think again it's a sign that some football clubs are aware that they are not PLCs, they are
Yeah.
not money-making vehicles, they are representative of the people.
Yeah, they're responsible. It was UNICEF, wasn't it, for the first couple of seasons on the show? So this is just for one season. Now, I'm guessing there are very few companies in this day and age who will be able to afford to bid. I mean, we're talking about major players here, but I'm also guessing, cynically, and again, that's something I've learned from you, unfortunately, a little bit of cynicism. That it's a great opportunity for a big company, a worldwide brand, to maybe pay a little bit over the odds and to get some very good PR, because it will look good from their point of view if they go, look, in the circumstances, we'll pay a little bit more than it's probably worth just for a season. And then, we hope you'll buy our cameras when we come out of this. So it is just for a season.
That's correct, yes, and I agree with you entirely. It's a win-win deal from the sponsor's point of view. First of all, it becomes the Megaphone or the Vodafone, or it becomes Nou Camp, and that is such an iconic name. And secondly, what they're effectively doing is that they're giving money to charity as a result of it. So they're going to get some reputational benefits on top of the sponsorship benefits.
And now we've got, and again, Bury fans will forgive me, this is a big leap again, isn't it? We've got an update on Bury, and it's not particularly encouraging, is it, unfortunately?
Well, it's a bit of a weird one. I mean, we've discussed at length the Bury situation, and one of the issues was that the club did have a mortgage over the ground, and that was with a company called Capital Finance Bridging Solutions Limited. And that was a very strange mortgage. It was supposed to be £2.5 million, but Bury only ever received 1.6 million. Somebody appeared to get a very big introduction fee, and then the interest rate was 10% a month. So by the time the club did go down the Swanee in terms of Steve Dale taking over, the loan was then at 3.7 million. Now that company went into administration last week, which means that somebody, presumably, is going to buy the debt owed by Bury to Capital Bridge Finance Solutions from the administrator. If that person is Steve Dale, I'm scared.
Right.
If it's somebody else with good intentions, they might be able to buy that debt at a discount. And it could be that, therefore, we could make progress in terms of Bury returning to Gig Lane. At present, nobody knows what the score is. So I'm normally upset when companies go bust. In the terms of Capital Bridge Financing Solutions, I've got very little sympathy for an organisation that was involved in the way that it was. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. So it could be bad news, it could be good news, but it's just showing that the wheels are still turning in respect of Gig Lane.
And I think, let's hope it is encouraging news, as you say. And I think just to avoid Guy, our producer, having conniptions or palpitations, if you prefer, so let's make this plain that this loan, this company owned the mortgage on Bury before Steve Dale took over. So there's no implication that they were part of his takeover process.
No. This was a loan that was organised by Stuart Day, who was the prior owner, who then sold Bury Football Club to Steve Dale for £1.
Yeah, you almost, it sounded to me like you were about to say who was the prick who sold Bury for £1. You stopped yourself, but I'm happy to go with the first. I think legally, I'm fine with that. Now let's get on to the big story of the week. We've talked about a lot of small clubs, a lot of Johnny-come-lately clubs formed only in the last 100 years, but the Crystal Palace FC have presented. Now, I have to say I knew about this quite some time ago because I was told by Steve Parish himself, but he also asked me to keep it quiet, which I said would be impossible. But this is a quote. So I know you want to be a big man amongst your mates, but if you could just keep this under your hat, that would be great. I said, this Twitter account, no, just keep it under your hat. I dropped all sorts of hints in the pub. I promise I didn't tell people, but the club have presented compelling evidence that we possibly are the oldest football club in the league. We all knew there was a Crystal Palace Football Club founded in 1861. The assumption then was that when they stopped playing football in 1874, it was to do with the FA wanting to use Crystal Palace for other things. Not the FA Cup final came 9 years later, but cricket match. So it was assumed that the original club was wound up, but they've now found very compelling evidence that the original club stayed in existence, and indeed some of the documents from the founding of the club in 1905 referred to this being not a new club. So, but whatever the also, I love. It turns out that the founder and captain of that first team in 1861 was called Frank Day.
Oh,
now I have put my Aunt Pat is the family historian. So Aunt Pat got a very quick phone call to say, look, get yourself, we need to get back another 30 years, get it back to 1861. And if we have a Frank Day, who worked in a brewery in Bermondsey, because listen, if it turned out that Crystal Palace FC was not only founded by my relative, but he also part owned a brewery, then I know what the title of my second book's going to be. But what I'd like to, the question is, and I do have a serious question, if the FA need to ratify it, to really not exploit, but what sort of money making potential is there? I mean, we've discovered, that the club has discovered what the original team's kit were, and it was a light blue and white half. As I'm a historian of football kits, it's actually Eton blue, or Cambridge blue is the colour. It was a light blue. A lot of football clubs were indeed working class, but the people who invested in them either went to Oxford and Cambridge or had children who went to Oxford and Cambridge. So I'm guessing that Eton blue and white halves is going to be our third kit next season. And I'm guessing the club will, why go through this effort to become the oldest team in the league without getting any money out of it? And God forbid it's anything to do with the fact that we're building a new stand and we need 7,000 more fans. Nothing, just that's a coincidence of timing. I believe we are the oldest club. But is there money in this? Is there money in this new discovery for us?
I think there is some money potentially in it. I think a lot will depend on how it is marketed, how it is presented to fans. If you take a look at Leeds United last season, that was their centenary year. And what they did on the back of that was that they did have a centenary kit. They had this, that, and the other. They had lots of events taking place during the course of the year to celebrate that event. Now, if Palace are proven to be the oldest club in football history, then they could have a year of celebration of that event. And on the back of that, they could, generate extra money from merchandise. Certainly a special kit. You could have other tat. That's not a criticism of Palace. You go into any club shop and it's full of tat. How much money did Notts County make from being the oldest football club in the world? It's questionable. So I think if the club are smart and they go down the right route, then yes, there will be some additional money. Is it going to build you a new stand? No, it's not.
Yeah, well, I should point out as well, we won't be the oldest club in the world because Sheffield FC are officially the oldest club in the world, still playing. They were founded in 1857. We would be the oldest club in the league, and we'd be the oldest club that was at the first meeting of the FA. And we'd be the only club in existence that played in the first round of the first FA Cup, and of course, lost. But there you are. But what this will prove, if we are the oldest club in the league, it will just prove yet another reason why we're more classy than Brighton.
Other opinions are available.
Yeah, wrong ones. So, Faith, we do have our question special coming out on Monday. As with last week, some of the questions already are very good, very intricate and very involved. And actually, I think people enjoyed being able to have a little bit more space to explore some of the questions last week. So do keep them coming. If you want to ask us questions for Monday's podcast, it's questions@priceoffootball.com. And we have been Adapt Dip Production. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much.
The Price of Football.
Take care, folks.
The Price of Football.